HighSec Buyback offers a 90% JITA anywhere in HighSec. Simply go to highsec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
Hey, welcome to Talking in Stations. It's Matterall here on our weekly podcast, The Weekend Report. I wanted to first tell you to look out for a new episode of The Travelers, which is Katya Say and Mark 726. It's a great exploration, mini episodes, mini documentaries on landmarks in EVE Online. So check that out. We're going to have, they're going to have the, I believe they're doing, there was a name for it. I don't have the teasing name, but it was basically Major Tom in space. So check that out. We'll look at that at the end of the show too. So don't miss that. That's Thursday on their channel. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Pochven and Fraternity, who is now basically the Third Empire, right? Let's talk about that too. They're coming on strong. After the war, they ended up coming out okay. We'll meet some people from Fraternity after we talk about Pochven. So let me first make some introductions about our Pochven crew and our Fraternity crew. We'll just talk to everybody at the same time. I'd like to welcome Sahara Jackal, right?
That's me. Hello.
Hello.
Pleasure to be back with you.
Good to see you. We see your little icon. Oh, it's a little icon. Let's go to 4 up there. All right, also with us today from the... Okay, so Sarah is from... basically, you live in Pochven, right?
I do. Strybog Clade is my alliance, and we are the premier Triglavian RP alliance in Pochven. We have lived there since before Pochven was created and intended to be its permanent residence, whether good or bad. And it is my great pleasure to see how Pochven has grown and developed into something really, really good.
Yeah, you were a big part of that. You're now in charge of the group. You were like second in command before that, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was. Our alliance was founded by Maldavius, who won EVE back in July, and turned the keys of the castle over to me and a couple of our co-directors. And we're still in Pochven. We survived an eviction, survived having all of our citadels blown up, and we still live in Pochven and are still Triglavian RPers at heart. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Right. Oh, awesome. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Sarah is actually part of TIS too. She's like our Pochven advisor, so to let us know all the ins and outs of what's going on behind the scenes, and she's great. Also from Pochven, but not necessarily from Pochven, people who just reside there, Rote Kapelle, that group. We have Murray Rothbardo. How are you doing, Murray?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. You're well known to TIS. You're around all the time talking to us, giving us information on what's going on and straightening us out every once in a while when we're in search of some information. Rote Kapelle is a big part of this story, as you will see. Also today we have from the Fraternity side, Luke Ananon. How are you doing, Luke?
Hello, good to be here again. I can't follow Sarah's intro, so I'm not even going to bother try.
Yeah, you are from what corporation in Fraternity, and what do you normally do for Fraternity?
So my corp is Into Oblivion, of which I'm the CEO of, and then from a wider Fraternity perspective, I am one of the directors of Fraternity working with Norris on the overall alliance side of things.
Yeah, and you're officially able to speak for Fraternity. That's been cleared by Norris, who is the...
Yeah. I think he cleared it to you directly as well, right?
Yeah, he did.
It's always hard to get voices, especially for Chinese community, right?
Yes, and you're just a fantastic resource for that. So thanks. Also from Fraternity, we have for the first time appearing BJK, who is a fleet commander for Fraternity and was heavily involved in a lot of the Pochven activities. How are you doing, BJK?
Hey, I'm good, cheers. Exciting to sit back after what seems to be a lot of long fights in Nalvula.
Yeah. This is very funny because I haven't really seen this before, but we got a lot of fan mail for you even before you arrived. I think just at the mention of your name. So obviously a popular guy inside your group. All right.
Super sweet.
Yeah, nice. Welcome. Let's talk about Pochven, what's been going on there. Let's first begin with Sarah. And can you just bring us up to speed on Pochven and what's been going on there?
Absolutely. So Pochven has really developed into this marvelous thunderdome of content that we love quite a lot, where the main source of PvE, which are these harder than usual kind of PvE content, harder than typical, brain dead ratting in EVE Online flashpoints, that also happen to be, lucrative enough that you can afford to fly the ships that are required to run them. It's sort of like incursion running on steroids, diamond rat AI. And that is the principal PvE mover. So that's the carrot that gets people into the system and coming to try and make money. But they're so lucrative that they are also extremely popular, and that has turned into this lovely thunderdome of content where to do those sites, you must be prepared for PvP at all times and ready to defend and fight for your meal. So that's what Pochven has kind of turned into, and the residents of Pochven have all. This is where you go if you want to fleet up in battleships or blingy marauders or etc. and really fight to fight for your dinner. So on a daily basis, you'll see big battleship on battleship fights going down. Certainly, my alliance does that every day. We fleet up in fairly expensive doctrines or some cheaper doctrines, depending on what people can fly. We try to make things available for all skill levels. Our bitter vets as well as our new bros.
Yeah.
And then, but the expectation is you're going to undock. There's no local. There's hostiles everywhere. You got to be prepared to throw down and really dedicate yourself to the PvP mindset, which is a really fantastic and unique place in all of New Eden. So that's what Pochven has developed into now. There are long-standing residents in Pochven, and Rote Kapelle has been here for. I won't speak for Murray, but they've been our neighbors in Pochven on the other side of the triangle for a year now, and we consider, my group considers them Pochven residents. They are Pochven neighbors, our true blue friends and neighbors over there. I guess frenemies, because we both like the Thunderdome nature. So
you skirmish every once in a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the most fun experiences of my EVE career was I tried to get the drop on Rote and stealthed in a very deep safe my almost my entire fleet out in a deep safe when I knew that a Rote fleet was coming around to do the flashpoint. They came into the flashpoint, and I brought my whole fleet to drop in on them and try and beat them, but we failed because I came a little too. I jumped the gun a little too early, and they were able to push me off. Also, as a new bro FC or a newbie FC, I learned that it's a really bad idea to FC a fleet in a Scorpion. Just don't do it. It's a bad idea. You need something tankier than a Scorpion. So I learned from that, and I had a great time. Rote guys after the fact were like, yeah, here's the things that you should have done better, and I got a bunch of advice from a bunch of Rote people saying, yeah, that was funny, you caught us with our pants down, but this is why you lost. And that was a great experience. So that's sort of like Pochven in a nutshell, the sort of community that we have here. We brawl with each other, but then when an event like this week happens where there's an invasion from an outside force, we all band together too. So what you saw this week was when Rote's Fortizars were in trouble and coming under fire, my group and the other groups that live or predominantly work in Pochven came to defend Rote.
Oh, so Murray, you're part of Rote Kapelle. Are you attracted to Pochven for all the activity there, or what puts you guys in? Because you guys identify a lot with Pochven. We see a lot of you in there. What's going on with that?
So we were looking for somewhere that would be a good place to get set up on the map after we were done with Tribute. And we basically just put together a list of all the options. It was Pochven, somewhere in like Scalding Pass, Low Sec, maybe one or two other places in Nullsec. And we realized that the Nullsec meta in particular is just so bad right now that even though Pochven was not a sure thing, we had some information on it because a few people like myself had gotten standings early on and dipped in. We had a bit of information just from scouting around, looking at kill boards, but we didn't know exactly what Pochven would be at the time. But when we looked at all the other options, they were a collective sum of garbage. So we figured, why not? And we ended up going into Pochven. A good example of like how little we were focused on Pochven when we initially moved in is we actually had to buy back our own Fortizar. We had initially sold the Fortizar we had in Nalvula to somebody because we didn't care, and we ended up buying it back from them later when we realized that we might actually hang out there for a while.
Yikes. All right, I'm trying to look at your site, but you guys are locked in. All right, so Rote Kapelle inside of Pochven, and you guys have been there for a while, but things have totally changed recently. Luke and BJ, let's turn this into a discussion in a second, but Luke, can you tell us like what Fraternity's objective was and why you would attack Rote Kapelle inside of Pochven?
I mean, I think this has probably been quite publicized on numerous occasions now. I mean, we have had some interest in Pochven previously. We did do some stuff in Wirashada right at the beginning, but I think at a larger level is, it is a place where we can get attacked from. It is in jump range of Vale because of the way that space is laid out post the conversion to the Pochven region, and it's a good reason for a fight, right? Rote were jumping into our space, we'll go to their space and shoot their stuff, and that kind of culminated in what's happened in the last week, right? But to be fair to Rote, it's been a hard slog. It has been a hard slog.
I mean, it took you until Chinese New Year. Before then, all the prior attempts were unsuccessful. So
I mean, use the time when you have the opportunity, right?
VJ, I know you were involved, and we're gonna go into what you did, what you saw, and all that stuff. Let me just set this up. Rote Kapelle leaves, and you can correct me, Marie, if I'm wrong. Rote Kapelle leaves Nullsec, pretty much goes into Pochven. Before they left Nullsec, they kind of got pushed out by Fraternity, so there's already some bad feelings there. In Pochven, you have a couple Fortizars, which you stage in, and you run around Pochven and do things there because you like that kind of gameplay. But you also use it to stage attacks against Fraternity. Am I right about that? And also to control, not control, but to participate in Pochven. Is that what those Fortizars and Nalvula were about?
Not really. So the thing is with Pochven is that structures are basically a minor convenience, more so than anything else. As Strybog will tell you, you do not actually need structures to live in Pochven, particularly if you have a good logistics setup and you have an understanding of how to navigate certain little details of the wormholes and how the stations function. So essentially, any structures we have are a tether place for if you really want to be AFK but not docked for some reason, and to clone swap, because you still can't clone swap in stations for some reason. And
is that exclusive to Pochven, or is that... Oh, I see. It's clone swap in the same station.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's everywhere. So just so people know what he's talking about, you can actually jump clone to a different station all you want, and you can have a bunch of clones doing that. That's all good. But what you can do in a player-owned station is you can swap inside the same station. So it's almost like putting on a different suit. You put on a suit that has your low-sec hunting implants, and then you can switch in the same structure to your hauling implants or, whatever. But you have different outfits you can wear inside of player structures only, not NPC structures.
A key component of that, right, too, is that Pochven is functionally wormhole space. You just know where it is. And so you can't actually stage a death clone inside of Pochven, so you can't use citadels for any advantage there. If you die and you pot it out, you still just have to fill them back in like everybody else, or take a wormhole back in like everybody else.
Okay. So, but you did have Fortizars there. They're a minor convenience, you were saying, and you said why. But you defended them against BJK and Fraternity. BJ, tell us about yourself first, and then why you targeted these Fortizars.
Nice. So I do a lot of fleets here for Fraternity. The Field Marshal looking at comps. That's not like a term loads of alliances use, but specifically it just means that we look at comps, we look at strategies, we kind of do all the legwork building up to the event, and then we then pull that trigger. For the longest time, we've been diving into Nalvula with hacks and tempests, and when we're up against, say, like a double-plated Fortizar that's anti-subcap fit, and in Rote's defense, their Raven Doctrine is it's spooky. Like, if you have target painters and webs from a Fortizar, your cruise missiles pretty much apply perfectly to anything. So most of the fights we've had so far in Nalvula have been trading. You just have to go in with X amount of hacks and you have to calculate, right, if we're losing hacks at this rate, can we win the objective? And that's not really fun for anybody involved. The whole hack meta of trading ships is, if you're doing something objective driven, sure, but for the individual player, that's a very boring experience. That I'm going to be here, but for how long am I going to be here? Like, when I die, do I just sit on comms? Do I try and filament back in? Do I watch Reddit to see if we won or not? Like, for the player perspective, it's just like it's boring. So our beef with that system in particular is, like it's been mentioned before, we're a target in Vale from Nalvula. You can blops out of Nalvula, but you can't blops into Nalvula. So essentially, we'd get dropped like around the clock in US time zone. Like, people would bring torp bombers, they'd hit a target, they'd hit a carrier, they'd cloak up, and they'd use a filament to get back home. So a bit like an escape rope in Pokemon. You just blops onto someone, you just sit there long enough, wait out your time, and you filament, and then we have the former fleet to come into Nalvula to just bother you, but we can't even do that because you're just tethered to a structure. So although, there's still stations there, you could still blops out of it. We haven't fixed the problem of being able to be hit by Pochven. Like, that will always be a thing, but you won't be able to do it from a Fortizar with your flag on anymore, which is very important for a group. A lot of people say that, it doesn't matter, it's just a flag, it's just a convenience, but it does mean a lot. We wouldn't have null set groups if we didn't have the flags. It means something to the players. So but yeah, so that was our problem with that's the beef there. But the strategy, we had to do something different, and we had to do it straight away. Like, if you build a new comp and it gives people time to work out a counter. So we didn't actually pull the trigger on our battleship doctrine until the armor timer, when we knew that if we win this timer, it's just the hull timer, and that's far too risky to put your carriers on there, because if you lose the hull timer, everything detethers, and then you just swamp it with dictors. It's much more risky. We won't have those plays that we had on the armor timer. Everyone fights over the armor timer. Everyone tries a bit more memey stuff on the hull.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that just like wormhole space, right? The armor timer is the one that you put all the chips on the table for, because the whole timer it is almost an afterthought.
Yeah, it's pretty telegraphed as how the armor timer went, whether or not you will win the whole timer or not. But a lot of groups, that's not a risk people are willing to take, especially not with, let's say, dread advantage or carries. You can't bring more caps into Nalvula. The ones that are there. If they die, that's it. They're not replaced. So,
right. And that is because you can't jump into that region completely.
Correct.
So.
And you can't manufacture them in there either.
You can't manufacture there.
Good point. Can you manufacture? What's the limitation on manufacturing in there?
You cannot build
capitals?
you can't build anything bigger than a bowhead. The bowhead is the largest thing that you can construct in Pochven. I know this because I actually constructed a bowhead in Pochven.
But what is, for instance, bigger than a bowhead? Is an orca bigger than a bowhead?
No, orca is smaller.
Smaller. Okay, so you can build
smaller
orcas.
or the same side, I guess. Yeah, you can build orcas, and in fact, we had a member long ago that just chain produced orcas back in the days when we still had manufacturing facilities, and that was his business in the game was making orcas, and the same thing. And I have to say, to my great irritation, you can get all of the parts that you need to build a Zernitra, but you can't build a Zernitra in the land of Zernitras.
That
Oh, it
feels
makes me
like it
so
should
mad.
be the exception, right?
Right. Yeah.
More
CC,
importantly,
please.
the way to get the parts for the Zernitra by being Triglavian is
Mhm.
not as efficient.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
It's a
I hear
labor
you
of
want to
love.
spend an extra 3 bill on your Zernitra. Congratulations.
An
Oh,
easy
it's
way
so-
to describe it, Matter, to your original point, is if it has a jump drive, it can't be built.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think that's like the really clear way of describing it.
On the other hand, that is also what makes Pochven so fucking great, excuse my language, is because there is no hot dropping. So bring your marauders out, bring your blingy battleships and your beam legions and whatever else you want to. There's no dreads going to come drop on you if you're out in a blingy battleship fleet. So it also makes Pochven very special. But yeah, just like BJK and Murray were talking about, those the dreads and capital ships that are in Nalvula. That major props to Rote for undocking on the armor timer. We got to see some big ticket things, and people in comms were like, "Oh, is that what I think it is?" It's like, yeah, it is.
Isn't
They
that
were
funny?
really excited.
Like scarcity of seeing something happen makes it a novelty.
Yeah.
And it becomes exciting.
Oh yeah, and I mean, some of the people in my fleet are like actual new bros, so they had never actually seen a Titan before, and then the Dragon of Nalvula shows up on grid during one of these fights, and they're like, "Oh, is that what I think it is?" And I'm a bitter ex goon used to hanging out on the 1DQ keep star with 75 different Titans just chilling there for no reason at all, and I'm like, oh
jaded.
yeah. It is kind of exciting when you see that for the first time. Oh, you sweet little new bro.
Yeah. It's infectious to their excitement, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. And to be honest, that's what makes it worthwhile. These big fights where you see people from all different alliances and they're going, who's negative 10.0? That's Pandemic Legion. Go do a Google search. They're like, who are the 10 guys? Who are these 10 guys? That Pandemic Legion. Do a Google search on Pandemic Legion, learn some history. It's really fascinating.
You should be shivering in your boots at this moment, but it's like...
Maybe not so much these days.
Not these days, but there was a time.
Retirees are at your doorstep.
Right.
There was a time when that would happen. You're right. I remember, not to go off topic too much, but I remember one of our FCs when I was coming up in a group. The Dead Terrorists is the group I was in, and one of our FCs was like, "I'm sorry, I got into a fight, and as soon as I saw it was PL, I just froze." Like that's the kind of reputation they had for a long time. Anyway. It's nice to see the new guys see some stuff that's novel and interesting inside of Pochven, and I think that some of the best parts of, if you ever saw that This Is Eve trailer, where the voices of excitement saying like, "Oh my God, is that what I think it is?" Just like you were saying, and that's when it really sinks home that these things are really big and unusual to newer players.
Oh yeah, and our guys were excited just to be there and see. Some of the images that you showed on screen there were taken by Celtier, who's one of the Triglavian residents. Just all those bubbles and the crazy Pochven is cool. It's got the crazy color scheme.
Yeah.
Everything is all red and pink and purple and looks unique and dark. With just a trillion ships everywhere on grid. Yeah, there we go. Look at those. Look at those gorgeous ships. All those big battleships. Yeah. And the fight's happening, the bubbles going off, and tie-dye, holy shit, people were like, what is this tie-dye thing? Some of them had never experienced tie-dye.
They say, what is this horrible thing? Why is my flying going?
What is this wonderful mechanic? I could think so clearly. That everyone comes.
Yeah, the FCs are like, oh, thank God, tie-dye. Meanwhile, everybody else is going, I hate this. And it wasn't even, and then, all of us bitter vets trying to explain to people, dudes, this isn't even bad tie-dye. Do you see the number 39? That's amazing for tie-dye. That's amazing.
If you don't have to open the debug.
When you see it orange, that means it's good. When you see it red, just go make a cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
If you
We were
don't have to
hovering in
open up your console to see whether or not your clicks have been registered by the client, then it's not real tie-dye.
yeah. Like red is dead. We're in the yellow orange zone, guys. Chill. Everything's great.
So you guys had fun on both sides, it sounds like. But at the end of the combat, Fraternity ends up with 3 things that happened here. One is that Rote Kapelle loses 2 Fortizars, that's 1 and 2, and Fraternity actually defends their own Fortizar inside of Pochven. So now you guys have the only Fortizar in Nalvula, is that right?
Yes.
The only Fortizar, I think there are 2 other Astra houses there, so it's not the only citadel in Nalvula, but it is the only large citadel. From what I remember.
Yeah. Is that do you, Luke or BJK, think that that's an advantage? Murray was saying not that big a advantage. What do you think?
I think if you are staging out, so this is just my take. If you're staging out of Nalvula, and you have a force that wants to stop you, so if you're trying to blop out of Nalvula is a really good example, right? Having tether just means you can sit there effectively, invulnerable while you do your thing. I think that tether is useful if you're in an NPC station, right? You've got to undock, you're not tethered, you can be kind of interfered with, right? I get Rote's point, but then you've got Astra houses there still, right? So they still also allow tether.
They still have that option, yeah. Are you guys targeting those?
I mean, we reinforced them previously. I couldn't comment on future plans.
Okay. All right, BJ, you tell me you won't.
Well, when the whole timer is.
All right. Well, when we see a whole timer on those Astra houses, we'll know that you're out to wipe Rote out of the entire Nalvula system.
Yeah, we'll never wipe them out of Nalvula. That won't be the case. It's just particularly those structures that we can't allow to exist. Like, they're going to stay there for a while, and that's absolutely fine. There's nothing you could do to stop a group from being an NPC station, right? Then, if they weren't in Nalvula, they could just do the same, like in Ob or like somewhere else in Lowsec or Venal. Like, as long as we live in Vale, there will always be groups that want to try and hunt us. That's fine. That's part of the game. That's why we have so many fleets. That's why people want to come and brawl us, and we welcome that. But we won't allow anyone to have a flag that is able to bridge there.
More accurately, as long as you keep having caps that'll just gate it.
Oh, for sure.
You're never going to do that, right? There's always going to be the cap that gates from a nice structure to a nice, trying to go through a gate to another structure when they could have just jumped. It's always going to happen, right?
Yeah, I think the industry backbone's never been healthier.
That's what keeps the economy going, right?
Exactly.
Dumbassery. Our economy is founded on the backs of dumbassery.
Exactly. At a very
ships
high level / strategic level, I knew the writing on the wall for the vast majority of structures in Pochven was as soon as they dropped the gate standings.
Yep.
As soon as the gate standings dropped, that made it functionally unviable long term for anyone who wasn't in a block to defend a structure within Pochven. If they had, even if they knew exactly what they were doing. And pretty much the only groups that would be able to hold a large structure were the ones that could form en masse at will to defend them.
By they, you mean CCP changing the mechanics that allowed...
Yes.
What? Describe that too.
So prior Pochven, for the vast majority of system movement, you needed at least 3.0 standings with Triglavians, which most people didn't have because they didn't want to do it, and they didn't understand the value, or they didn't have interest in going through that grind in order to gain access to Pochven. And that provided a pretty heavy local advantage for groups that wanted to do things there. When the only point of ingress for going into a particular system is the wormhole, that provides you with a lot of counterplay and a lot of base level protection against large numbers, because there are a lot of groups that just aren't willing to go through the effort barrier of getting people to that system. once that effort barrier was removed, it made it much, much easier for any group to file a ton of people into Pochven. And you saw it first with the Strybog structures and then the dozens of other structures that also died during that first month.
Yeah, it was quick.
Whereas Rote early on were still fine because we had the numbers natively to deal with any sort of small or medium incursion, and we had enough friends that we could get in that we could deal with any like mid to large scale attempt, anything up to like 400 or 500 characters. We could largely deal with pretty well natively.
Sahara, so your former leader came on to TIS to talk about like the defending their structures once this change happened. It seemed like that is the final straw for him that burned him out of the game. Am I wrong about that? Did that have anything to do with it?
No,
Okay.
you are 100% right. And in fact, when it became that was his, when it became clear that that was the case, that a small alliance like a Strybog Clade is tiny by we are certainly smaller than Rote.
How many are we talking here?
Oh, I'm talking about like less than 100 human beings, kind of tiny as an alliance. Small, close knit. We have some friends who are also pretty tiny, and mostly, our alliance is populated by people by a handful of bitter vets, and then a lot of people who had never left HiSec before the Triglavian invasions came, and just fell in love with PvP really for the first time by learning about it through the invasions, and then learning about it through Pochven. So our former leader, we were sort of the first ones to fall to the new mechanic, like what Murray is talking about here with the dropping of the gate standings. Before, interesting sort of contrast, we actually fought Fraternity in March of 2021. We had a fairly significant scuffle. I mean, significant for us, tiny for Fraternity at the time, but major sort of scuffle with Fraternity. Doing the same things, we were enjoying Pochven. We started hot dropping out of Pochven into blopsing and reinforcing jump bridges, and not surprisingly, Norris took exception to that. So they came to Pochven and came to Wirashota, where we lived and had all of our stations, or the majority of our stations, and came to attack us. But when the gate standings were still a requirement, we could keep them out of Pochven. They couldn't come into Wirashota because they didn't have 3.0 standings. And one of the unique features of Wirashota is that you can roll the wormholes so that the wormhole to Wirashota spawns in another Pochven system called Otanumi, and you can roll the entrance to Otanumi into Wirashota. So we called it hyperlooping, which meant that the wormholes are effectively closed. No one can get in through the wormhole because the wormholes only open inside of Pochven. So the only way that you can roll those wormholes is if you have at least 3.0 standing, which again, Fraternity didn't have. So there were a couple of occasions when an entire Fraternity fleet of 200 people was coming to attack us. We rolled the holes, hyperlooped them, and they had to go home because there was no way to get in.
Guys are so clever.
Here's an interesting question.
That's pretty cool.
This is an interesting question though. Because I heard this from someone else. Do you think the hyperlooping thing reduced the attackability of Pochven to the point that CCP brought the filaments out because it was locking Pochven out?
Oh no, the filaments were there day one.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah, so the change was brought about because not enough people were coming into Pochven, and
Correct.
There was a ton of complaining, like especially like if you talk to like somebody who's on the CSM at the time, right? There was this big like idea that the standings grind was brutal and it took 1,000,000 years and it was super annoying and nobody came into Pochven because nobody wanted to do it. And I think that a lot of the folks that ended up not doing the standings grind didn't actually figure out the easy ways to do it.
No.
As Sahara can tell you, Rote Kapelle went from like 1 or 2 characters that were our scouts in Pochven, and then like a week and a half later, our entire alliance was in. just kind
Yeah.
of popped up there. And that was intentional. We waited a little bit so that, because we still had an Astron there at the time, we didn't want to show up until we knew we had enough people to defend the Citadel, and people were like, oh, they're actually living here. But, like, it was not hard. And I think that's removal of the standings thing has been at least a semi-issue in terms of the, like, day-to-day content in Pochven as well a few times. Because prior, you were only fighting groups that had the numbers to do things in Pochven. And were doing things explicitly in Pochven. And what you would see from early on in Goonswarm or early on by Horde is when they see a fight that is an even fight, but they don't want to take it because they know their pilots aren't as good, or they know their ships aren't as good, and they're not willing to upship to take the fight, they ping main and filament people in to get ships, and then they go take the fight with 3-1 odds. Which, in reality, the way Pochven works is it very much pushes people who don't have those numbers that you need to upship to take fights. And that's what draws a lot of groups in, is these fights between expensive ships that you don't get to use anywhere else. And so the gate standings, while, yes, they have generated much more day-to-day content in Pochven, effort barriers serve a purpose in EVE in creating areas like wormholes in Pochven that are smaller scale conflicts. And it's something important to think about when you're like designing a region at a theoretical level.
Mm. All right, you're listening to Murray Rothbardo from Rote Kapelle. He's also joined by Sahara Jackal, who is part of this Triblog Clade? Strybog Clade inside of Pochven. Those are the locals, more or less. Mostly Sahara is the local. And
No,
live there
Rote
too.
local.
okay, all right. I thought you were
I think
like
we're-
long-term squatters rather than.
No.
Are we third or second on Z-Kill for Pochven now? I
know
don't remember if we passed
I know you're
games yet.
highly active there. I didn't realize that was like your home base and where most of your
Well,
activities.
let me put it this way: as you know, speaking on behalf of the group that helped create Pochven, very seriously and lived there from day one, we consider Rote Kapelle
They're
natives.
bros. Okay.
Yes,
all
we
right.
do.
I will now consider them natives too. So
Excellent.
I think of Rote as small gang, but that's because Rote Kapelle goes a long way back, right? They've been a reputable alliance for a long time. But and also from Fraternity, we have Luke Ananon and the fleet commander BJK with us as well. That's who's on the show today.
Actually, I do have something to thank Fraternity for. So thanks to you guys rolling up and taking a couple fights against us, we are now the top alliance in Pochven all time.
Hey, congratulations
Nice.
on your Z-Kill stat.
Piss off, Horde. Or at least
on,
the next 10 days or so.
I heard this morning, though, that you stacked the deck because you stuck a bunch of shuttles and infantile ships inside of a structure that blew up.
Yeah,
But
I
we-
thought I had
but we didn't
16
kill them,
shuttles in your
so that-
stage in Fortizars. That was news to me.
We didn't kill them, so that wouldn't show up in these stats. Also, if you've ever evicted a wormhole, congratulations. That's what happens.
They do that too. Yeah. It's
I
not an
have to
exploit.
admit,
It's a wormhole.
I gave my extra molluses that I didn't feed to Fraternity to Beta Page and Drake Idon, our two great Seaguller friends, and they were all named Space Mom Loves You, and that was my little gift to them on their kill board. So I got pinged this morning from Drake going, "Why am I awake to 3 mollusk kills on my kill board?" And I was like, "Because I love you, Drake. That's why."
It's a term of endearment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So BJ, the battles, how did they go? And are you satisfied with like the level of performance that Fraternity showed?
Oh, 100% yes. So historically, I mentioned before, we've taken Munids in, we've taken hacks in because, Munin meta, etc. But to actually remove this structure, it needed a completely different tactic. So Rote and other groups of similar size, like Boss, do this up in Venal. They use Ravens that could shoot out to about 250 kilometers. And then, like, if you've got a shield composition, I don't know, you might use Huginns for your target painters. You might use Tenormen, hyenas. But in either case, anything you would use to make the missiles apply is easy to kill. So what they're doing with the structures is they're using the structures to target painted web, which obviously you can't kill until you finish the timer. And they will always be able to web and target paint you down. So cruise missiles, 250 kilometers, perfect application on any ship. They literally count down, kill one person, kill the next person, keep going down the list until eventually you've got nothing left. It's a fantastic strategy. So we tried it once with Tempests, but we got boosted all over the place. That didn't quite work out. So for the armor timer, we switched to rogues. So our plan for this was to sit outside of the range of the Ravens, sit behind the structure. So if they undock, they've kind of like got to turn around and maneuver into position. Sit perfectly behind them, and instead of focusing the fight around the Fortizar, we focus the fight around our rogues. So if you want to stop us pausing the structure with damage cap, you need to bring all of your ships out of tether, including your dreads, including your titans, including the Cerberus fleet that's bouncing around the grid. Like, everything needs to come to us. So we just drew a line in the sand and say, this here is where we fight. Like, there's some really good videos. One of the guys in my corp, made like a really good video of, like, he was in the Roke fleet in one of the Dictors, and you could see everything warping in and out. Like, there's a tornado fleet bouncing around. There's a Gnosis fleet moving around. There's like a ton of Mauluses warping in to try and damp. But we declared that, like, this is the terms that we fight on. When those, like, we didn't think the dreads would warp in. Like, so when we did, everyone was like, quick, burn up, burn up, burn up. Like, get transversal. Like, we didn't think you were going to do that. So props, because we didn't have a counterplay for you. We just had to burn an angle. But yeah, for those in the battleship fleets, it was like, 4 stacks of guns on the structure, and then focus fire on anything else as it comes in range.
So, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, so from the performance side of things, that's very different to how groups normally take fights. Usually it's munins and trade until you win, or
Right.
I know TFIs, and then just pray that your Balcorns don't die so you can actually apply. So this was a very different strategy for us. It's the maiden voyage of the Rokes, and we're wildly impressed at how it all worked.
Great. So Rokes can be used as kiting ships. They can shoot super long ranges, which is, I think, how you set them up. You set them up to be super long range, out of range of dreadnoughts, but Rote Kapelle dreadnoughts that were defending the structure. But the dreadnoughts, what did they do? They had to turn to long range dreadnoughts, or you said they approached you guys?
Yes, there were anti-cap dreads. So in order to hit us, they had to sit on the very edge of their tether. So, if you're doing an armor timer and you don't win, it's fine. You just, see dread, you unbastion, and you unlock all the targets, and you just tether back up. And then, even though the fight's over, everyone on that grid is, for lack of better words, safe. So you can make those risky plays. So in order for them to hit us, you had to get out of that comfort zone. So you couldn't immediately tether up if it was getting a bit hairy. So, it's the first time we'd used that comp. It worked exactly as we thought it would. Watching everything move around us. Oh, wildly.
Right.
But it's one of this, like, now we've done that, for the next timer, they turn up with dampening Mauluses. Yeah. We don't track Mauluses very well, especially if they're Tenormen fit. Like, they're frigates with 3k EHP that just live because we can't hit them, right? That was good. So we had to have, like, a secondary fleet just to deal with those.
Yeah, that was fun. That was.
Oh, no, it wasn't. That was horrible.
At one point when NC, I have to say, we reshipped. We had some reships there, and we just wanted to be Cancer. We were like, okay, they're bringing Rokes. We're gonna bring damping ships and be really annoying. And so, those Mauluses have like 3 damps each on them. I mean, they're so bad.
So for those that don't know, I just want to explain it. That is shortening. Dampening is shortening the range of these long range battleships. So that's going to hurt them. Right. They have to move closer.
Right. They either have to move closer or they just can't shoot. They can't do anything. And so with each one of them, I had a fleet of, I think we had 22 people in my fleet, and all of them were in damping ships, except for a couple that were in griffins that were then jamming people too. So that is also annoying. We lived longer than I expected, but then when I saw the Munins show up, I was like, well, that was fun. This is over now. And we all got wiped out. We reshipped again, and then I saw the NC Dot fleet, and so I told the entire fleet to damp Lady Scarlet because that was my way of saying hi. And I messaged her on the ladies' Discord and was like, I sent my whole fleet to damp you, and she was like, "You're so annoying." And
it's like a big hug.
Yeah, it was a big hug. So you got to do that when you see your friends on grid. You know
but I mean? NCPL was there. Sorry, NC was there and PL was there, both on Fraternity's side. Interesting.
Yeah, well, PL was there, but I think the only PL fleet that was there was Pittsburgh and the original Sinners folks, who also have a long-standing feud with Rote.
So there's history there, right? So they were pretty active in Pochven during the time when they were in NSH. So while they're in NC now, there's the kind of legacy of that corp.
The story goes back further than that.
Oh, let's hear it.
I mean, the first time we ran into Pittsburgh and a couple of his folks was when he was in Trigger Happy.
Oh,
and he started the USTZ wing of Trigger Happy and started picking fights with Unspoken. So Unspoken and Rote were fighting Trigger Happy for a while. That's where I killed his vendetta.
Oh,
yes, and all went downhill from there.
Yeah, look what you started.
I didn't start it. He shot my athletic.
Okay,
that was a defensive dunk. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, so good job all around, Fraternity. A good fight to the Pochven guys. What do you think is going to happen here in the future in Pochven?
I think it's going to be exactly the same thing as it was yesterday or the day before. Where I have no doubt that Rote, just speaking from third party here, Rote is still Rote, and they still live in Pochven. They're still going to live in those NPC stations, I bet, and they're still going to do Rote things.
I need to decide whether 4-1 or 9-2 looks cooler. I haven't looked yet.
The NPC stations in Nalvula, right?
It doesn't matter because cloning isn't real, so whatever one I want to do. Easy peasy.
Luke, BJK, what are you guys' future plans for Pochven? Do you have any that you can talk about? Probably not.
Maybe Frat will start trying to run flashpoints again. You guys haven't bothered in a long time.
No, not really. There's options on the table now. We've got the only fort, but that's about it, really.
All right, let's switch.
That doesn't change how you run Flashpoint. You gotta leave Nalvula to do that.
Oh, does it not? Oh, so I didn't really think it through. I just said it.
We're going to change gears now to talk a little bit more about Fraternity, because they're not only busy in Pochven, they're actually also busy in their home system where they have Snuff's dreadnoughts trapped. They have about 70 dreadnoughts trapped that came into the system and were able to pick off, I believe, 2 Titans and a super carrier, but in the process, they got trapped.
Yeah, it was an Erebus, an Avatar, and a Nyx. They managed to catch. I think this was so not the Friday just gone, but the Friday previously.
Yeah.
And they've been there ever since.
I heard one of those Titans was like a mosquito delight. It just couldn't help itself. It ran right towards the dread bomb.
I mean, the Komodo that we lost a couple of months ago was a Komodo trying to shoot a Tempest on a gate. Sometimes people are going to warp there and do stupid things, right?
But he needs that banner doing it wrong over his head. Okay, so you guys have Snuff like underfoot. I kind of see like Snuff jumps in, takes out a couple of your guys. You guys jump all over Snuff and stick their face in the dirt, and you're kind of sitting on top of them. How long can this go on?
I mean, I'm gonna defer to BJK to comment, but I think 99% of like all the players in Frat are just enjoying watching fleet after fleet after fleet come into 4H to have a fight to try and free those dreads. So while content is quiet everywhere else in Eve, keeping them held there just to recycling the bubbles to keep them held there is a continuous content generator, right? So I think everybody is super happy to just keep that camp going.
Oh,
Yeah,
Fraternity is a very busy alliance, right? We've got a lot of things we're doing. Like we had this Nalvula stuff. We're gonna have the campaigns afterwards, but like trapping like 100 pilots from Snuffed Out wasn't really on the roadmap. This is just it's just a happy like thing that's happened that we're able to capitalize on. Like this isn't anything that was on the cards. We didn't schedule this. This isn't part of any master plan. This is just kind of like, oh well, they're here. Who doesn't want to dunk 100 caps like right on our stage? I think there was comments in the meta show mentioned that this is going to be very different to M2 because people would just log in every day. Like there was 24/7 content, and
in M2,
people,
and that went on for
yeah.
a month. But those were Titans, and it was a cataclysmic moment for these two major coalitions of coalitions were involved in that.
It's very different.
And do you think it'll be different?
Yeah, because I mean, Snuff has a lot more discipline. Like, so with people in like, with all due respect to what's happening in Pappy, people would just log in and they just lose the ship because then they could get involved in the fight the next day, right?
Yeah, right.
And it wouldn't really matter because they didn't really care about that cap. They just wanted to get involved in what was happening because it's one of the exciting things.
Well, here's a huge difference, BJK. If you think about it, was the price of a dreadnought was a lot different back then. You could literally just throw a dreadnought away if you wanted to, because you could get back in the fight pretty easily. But dreadnoughts are now like 4 or 5 times what they used to cost.
Oh, sure, and there's less people manufacturing them as well, so there's fewer sources to get them from.
Mm-hmm. So it's a little more, having 70 dreads caught. I know Snuffer, like, it's no sweat. They have they have a big arsenal and everything else. But 70 dreads, I think we calculated if they were worth even only 6 billion, fitting included if you want, that this was a 240 billion ISK arsenal that was stuck under Fraternity's bubbles.
Yeah, for sure. And the strength of Snuffed Out comes from their ability to escalate, like their capital superiority. Mm-hmm. And it's not just those ships. It's not about those ships. It's the pilots that are trapped there as well. Like that's 100 pilots that they can't bring to fight in low sec on the next time. But that's 100 pilots they can't bring to escalate on top of Brave when they're playing around in Pure Blind. And that is far more damaging to a group. And that's why I'm surprised to see so many people from all the alliances rocking up in our home to try and help them out. Like, I mean, we're doing a lot of people in either favor right now. So I'd imagine there'd be more people on our team there, but that is what it is.
I have to admit, I laughed. I laughed when I heard that they were bubble fucked. like, oh, turnaround is fair play, right?
Yeah, they were quick to mobilize after downtime. They were very quick. The groups rely on downtime mechanics to get them out. So they'll drop 2 minutes of downtime, shoot someone. As soon as downtime's over, log back in and jump out. But this time we were quicker.
I think they were the victim of a number of key people being online just so happened before downtime when that all kicked off. And they've done it to us before, right? So they've done it before and they've got out and, people have to, you learn from that and go, right, okay, this has happened. Just do this the moment the server comes up and let's see what happens.
Fraternity is not the group you want to tangle with at downtime. This is basically their prime time. So they're going to be able to straddle both ends of downtime. It seems like you're the wrong group to try to work downtime tricks on.
Maybe, but we have lots of Titans that warp to gates, right? So what are you going to do?
Yeah. What can I say? AOM had a share of those. We'll talk about AOM in a second. But must feel good to have. I know there's no love lost between Snuffed Out and Fraternity. You guys don't like each other. So it must feel pretty good to have them trapped. It's very rare for them to get trapped. So congratulations on that.
I think it's the novelty of the rarity that they made that mistake that I think is the most amusement most people are having at the moment.
It's the second mistake I think they've made in the North. They seem to have made against GOTG, they also made a mistake that almost cost them dearly. They managed to get out, but they bit hard on something and didn't have good backup and barely made it out before GOTG or a Dead Coalition. Actually, Siberian Squad really kind of came in and cleaned them out pretty fast. This is the second time I've seen Snuff make a mistake. That's very rare over the years, right? We're talking 5-6 years. a mistake like this. They've done things that have been remarkable, like an ambush against Dread Bomb of Wrecking Crew in Amamaki. That was an impressive trap that they set for RC or Dread Bomb. But this is Snuff now on the receiving end of this. Although they did get 2 Titans, and they got something out of this, but they're going to lose a lot if they don't get those things out. So we'll keep an eye on what happens here. And the other thing that you're lacking, Fraternity, is you don't have a DJ like Mind One to keep you guys like, thump, thump, thump for 24/7.
Pay for a DJ.
Yeah, we'll pay for DJ. If you have those skills, you might want to contact Fraternity.
Warwick or Fleet do like a plug DJ for their fights on a Friday night. Yeah. So we do have ways, but no streamers.
We were going to do our most influential this year. We should still do it, but we're about a month and a half late. And one of our most influential nominees was Mind One, who's the DJ that played music or hung out with all these guys that were doing the M2 camp for so long. And we just feel like that guy did so much for Imperium and their survival. He did so much for them, keeping them going, and also for the people on the other side too. Everybody could watch M1 or Mind One, but he was going to be one of our most influential players, and I think he came to EVE recently. I don't think he was an old player, but anyway.
One of the big things the Imperium mentioned is that it's about the community they have there that makes them strong, and having people that can bring people into stream, bring people onto comms, and bring that energy and get the group together is what a group really needs.
I see it as people who have a lot of time on their hands. That's how I see it. And that has helped Fraternity in this situation, because basically you guys have been able to, this is happening during Chinese New Year's, right? Fraternity is mainly a Chinese alliance. You have the whole week off for these guys, so they can show up US time zone, EU time zone, or their normal Asian, or what do you call the time zone? There's different names for it.
CN, or you can call it AUTZ, right? Because CN, they're rough. They overlap each other pretty heavily.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that helps, right? Having people available helps. And, right. That's what's so interesting about the war last year, because during COVID, a lot of people were at home. So there was so many factors to that war. Speaking of wars, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's why I was winning EVE until the pandemic hit. I had kind of fallen out of it in 2019. And then, middle of 2020, I was like, I need some human interaction or I'm going to go crazy. Yeah. All right, what can I do for human interaction?
Somebody touch me.
EVE is like, we don't play this game because the game mechanics are great, right? We play this game because the people and the stories that you get to create from this game are the best. And that is the pandemic is what brought me back, and I think there's a lot of people that were in the same boat.
A little off topic, but I do want to explore this with you guys, all of you guys. They're remaking Knights of the Old Republic, and it looks, the little teaser looks great, and even my son's hyped, who wasn't around when the original came out. And I was thinking, so we went back and looked at the original game and how blocky the artwork was for those animations and characters. And I was like, this was a great story game, although it doesn't look that great, right? And I just thought, how much do we forgive video games their graphics? Because we had great times playing these games 10, 20 years ago, and the graphics were like unbelievable. Unbelievably,
by today's standard, they're unbelievably bad, right? But Knights of the Old Republic, when it came out, and by the way, thanks for making me feel old, because I know how old your son is, and you just said he wasn't around, and I'm like, God,
he might have been. I don't know.
It has been that long.
Good,
shoot, it's almost 20 years old now. Oh, it's awful.
Yeah. So
but back in the day, in 2003, those Knights of the Old Republic, I remember running around when it was brand new, running around in that game and going, oh man, everything is so beautiful. Yeah. I can't believe it. A game that came out a year later, Vampire Bloodlines: The Masquerade. Mm-hmm. I remember just going bananas about how incredibly, in depth the graphics were in that game. I fired it up last year again to look at it again, and I'm like, whoa, this is janky.
Right. Yeah, that's so the point is we take the stories, we take the memories, and we kind of forget the limitations of the time. We don't ever say like, yeah, that game looks, I can't believe I bought into that game. Look how bad it looks. It's like, no, if you played, I don't know, if you played Metal Gear Solid, you're like, what an amazing storytelling thing. You don't remember the graphics were kind of blocky or whatever. So all that to say, to your point, what we take away from these games, these video games, especially MMORPGs, are the stories and the people and the people you talk with, because let's face it, video games are a social media.
They are, yeah.
All right,
they absolutely are.
Sorry, took you guys in a pretty deep direction. Let's go back up to AOM, Army of Mango, Fraternity's rivals in the Chinese time zone. There's some history there. Well, there was a war. You guys basically overwhelmed your opponents. What?
War, inverted commas. I mean, it didn't last long enough to be called a war, I don't think.
Right. Remember at the beginning of the show, I was talking about how I had Fulcrum from Army of Mangoes and Noros from Fraternity on the same show. And one of the things that Noros said was like, oh yeah, we're going to kill you, but not today. We're going to work together to fight this war. This was in 2020 when they were starting up the PAPI was forming and stuff. Well, it turns out during the war against Imperium, Fraternity did some stuff. We'll talk about that. I don't remember Army of Mango doing very much. What do you guys think?
I mean, obviously Army of Mango, with them largely being aligned with Legacy, I'm sure there's some stuff they did that, we didn't see. I know from a Fraternity perspective, I mean, Fraternity kind of gets a bit of a bad rap and kind of goes, oh, you didn't do anything during like World War B2. And I'm like, well, I mean, Fraternity dropped most of the Keepstar chain, did most of the kind of breaking out of Helm's Deep when that was a thing.
Critical thing, by the way, dropping that Keepstar chain. That was like building the railroad that brought the cannons to the war. That was a big deal.
And I'm pretty sure, and I know for a fact, the first two Keepstars that went down in NPC Delve, the FWST ones, we dropped. I know because I know who dropped them, and they were specifically not logging into that account in case they accidentally logged in their freighter.
Was that you?
That was just sitting in. It wasn't me. But they just didn't want to log in accidentally in the middle of FWST in a freighter with a Keepstar in it.
Might turn out bad.
For obvious reasons, right? I mean, just start the festivities early. But I think it's interesting because I think there's a big propensity where you think, like, most of Fraternity is a Chinese alliance. So I think there's a big propensity for people to kind of go, oh, this didn't happen, or Fraternity didn't do this or that, and forget that actually there are people that can kind of speak back in English and go, well, we did. Just because the majority of the alliance can't respond in English because they can't, get on Reddit, is very easy to forget their involvement.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you pointed out was, and I knew it at the time, but it had slipped from memory, was just how important you guys were to the fall of Helm's Deep. That strategy to basically move into the industrial sector of Delve and protect it, Sinojam everything behind the walls, and then put 2 Keepstars down in that one system that was a choke point. And the idea was, we'll hold off this industrial sector and win a war of attrition. I believe that was their strategy. But you guys broke right through that.
It's taking advantage of time zones at that point, right? I think we all know from a CN kind of AU time zone. AU time zone is largely the weakest for most places around the game. So you just leverage that. Everyone leverages their advantages, right? So I think it's just taking advantage of that.
That's part of the power of Fraternity. I even look at Fraternity and think, I've always had my eye on Fraternity, right? Even from talking to Wind Spirits, which we did like 2 years ago, to like looking at how they've developed, how they've grown, how the Chinese time zone has kind of settled out. Because there was a huge land rush for Chinese time zone when about a year and a half ago. But even watching you guys kind of come to power, you guys have played your cards very well. And you guys were able to put on the field recently to defend your own interests in Pochven about 900 to 1,000 people. That's significant. That's a big call to arms, and that's a big rally. But in addition to that, and this is, I think, what makes you guys special, you guys own now the time zone, which is critical. It was a strategic time zone, right? The dead of night for a lot of EVE players, and you guys own that night. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. Yeah. That's an interesting point.
And I could say, like, you know, if one of the power cards that Sort Dragon could play, I mean, he's a notable player for a long time. This isn't his only trick, and he's got a long history. He's no longer playing the game that I know of. But one of the powers that he was able to bring was that he was in the Australian time zone, and he put together the Siberian squad with, who were the other groups? There was a couple of Chinese groups, but not a lot of them.
Paris and Ranger Regiment was GOTG, weren't they?
Yeah, but before that, Darkness, I think, was, you know, he basically owned the night. And that gave him a whole lot of influence, more influence than, you know, his alliance should have had or whatever. But for their size, basically, for their size. So that was a big deal. But when you guys came around, and he knew this, and I knew this, we talked about it, he was going to be displaced by whatever leader came up and took over the time zone. And he knew he needed to either attract Fraternity or AOM and incorporate them into GOTG or Dead Coalition, or pretty much like his power was going to shift away from him. And it did. I think that's one of the reasons, maybe, besides, you know, whatever else is going on, that he is no longer like in the game or a power broker in the game. You guys kind of took that. And now that AOM is gone, I don't know who contests Fraternity in that time zone.
I think we certainly have one of the large numbers in that time zone, if not the largest at this point. I think there are. There are other entities that, you know, can put up a pretty good fight in that time zone. But I think it's fair to say, yeah, the numbers are there. So we've got them up on screen, so I can't even deny them.
Yeah, 22,000 characters are in there, but we know that those numbers are always inflated. It's just like anything else. If you have a town of 10,000 and you have a city council meeting, only a few hundred people show up. You guys still were able to put 1,000 people basically into a fight. That is a big deal, especially for the time zone. So there's no denying Fraternity is a power, but that wasn't always the case. You had a rival, Army of Mangoes, also pretty powerful. Well, we won't even talk about Serenity, but they were pretty powerful, and they had a lot of hardware, and these guys were really good at making money and building their infrastructure. And you guys said you were going to eventually fight them. There might have been some personal grudges between some of the leadership, which is always kind of good. But what happened? That fight hardly happened. What did you guys help take out their allies before you took them on, which is a natural progression of war? Like take out the weak ones?
So I'm not sure if BJK is still here. I know he's currently doing stuff in game as well. Mm-hmm. But we did have the non-Chinese part of Fraternity was in SO from, I want to say October. Someone correct me if I'm wrong with that. Brawling with Evictus until they threw in the flag. I believe that's partially because of IRL reasons with their leadership. And then like the main course, it's kind of bittersweet, right? I kind of wanted a good 2, 3, 4 weeks of fighting, and I think just a load of bad decisions were made that caused that to kind of implode at the rate it did.
Well, they lost a key ally, and I think that was the beginning of just getting word that Snuff tried to break out again, so they must have seen that BJK was busy on this show. That's why he's probably busy right now, trying to keep...
They did 2 bubbles and they've left. It's fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll go...
Just building on Luke's point, we were obviously in Esoteria for quite some time. Like, it was, the one strong thing Fraternity has is that we have multi-time zone players. Like, we have multi-time zone groups. We've got EU coverage, US coverage, but obviously our strongest being CN. So a group like Army of Mangoes, which is primarily CN, The technique there, like you mentioned, we were deployed in Esoteria for a while, or Stain technically. We're deployed there for quite some time, but we were chipping away at the EU and US time zone groups there, and I think that's what eventually exposed that big weakness that we could push 120 bombers through a wormhole and ref their staging keep star like 6 hours after Naraus declared war. Like it
was instant.
Yeah, there was no downtime between the announcement and us doing something about it.
But let's be real. The war was already underway, right? I mean,
big time.
You declared war pretty much at the point where you were ready to. I mean, what did the declaration of war from Fraternity against AOM really mean anyway?
I mean, I take it as a reiteration of intent, right? So, there'd been a bubbling. There'd been bubbling skirmishes, like even in World War B2, right? There were the odd kind of falling out between AOM and Fraternity. Most notably, their Nightmare fleet that I think got plastered all over Reddit. I think more than anything, because like Ian, we'd been active down there already. I think it was more of a statement of intent, maybe to the rest of Fraternity as well, especially the Chinese side, which is, to say all of you guys have wanted to have this fight. It's now time to have this fight, and focus the mind, sort of thing.
Yeah. So you took out their allies, you weakened their alternative time zones, you applied pressure. I think the writing was on the wall pretty quick. We've been through this, but I think there's a lot more to the story still, because we haven't heard what happened to AOM. We just know that they tried to get into the Imperium. The Imperium changed their mind publicly and kicked them out, and they essentially dissipated since then. So you chased them into the arms of the Imperium, and then the Imperium did the work. So that to me seems like whether that was part of. I suspected either Noros is like a genius diplomat, or this was really fortuitous for Fraternity.
Well, I thought it was a little more complicated than that. That AOM tried to fold into an Imperium without anybody.
Sahara, where did you hear that?
Just from what was posted, public sources, because I have not been a member of the Imperium since November. I've cut all ties with them, months ago, but just based on what I was seeing in reports on the Meta Show and Reddit.
That's what I'm getting at. You heard that from them. You heard that from them.
Okay. All right.
All sources with that story go back to the Imperium. So that's their version of events. And AOM is totally quiet on this issue. But I can't help but think that there's definitely some diplomacy. I want Noros to talk about it, though. We got to get him on the record to see what diplomacy was happening with Fraternity and the Imperium, if any diplomacy was happening. I think there was, but I don't know.
Well, that would be fascinating to hear about then.
Yeah, because
Interview you'll have to find him for, I think.
I have to get it out of him. He's got to be the one to talk about it. But it seems very logical. Now everything makes sense. That Fraternity basically puts pressure on Imperium. Imperium changes their mind and destroys their Fraternity's enemy for them. That is a big card for Fraternity to play. That is, if that's what happened, which I suspect it was like that, that's a pretty cool move that we've seen. That to me feels like, worthy of Three Kingdoms. And it's kind of what makes sense to me, because what happens normally when you want to get out of a contract that you made and then you change your mind is that you put a hole in it, right? I don't know if you guys have been involved in contracts, but you get into a contract, you want out. You can't break a contract because you're going to ruin your credibility. So what do? You find any little detail you can to poke holes in it, to break contingencies. And once you break contingencies, you erode the contract, and the contract breaks and everything's fair. Then you're actually still an honest person, but you totally got away with not doing what you said you were going to do. That's how contracts are broken in the real world. So,
we've discussed this a couple of times, right? I still think there's a lot of truth to you don't want as a coalition leader, you don't want an entire alliance effectively seizing control of an alliance that you already have a relationship with, right? Which is I know is to your point is the kind of meta show line, but I think there's definitely a lot of truth to that, right? Because you build up those relationships.
Yes, anybody you ask in nullsec will say, I don't want to inherit leadership. I'll inherit the people. I want the people. I want the labor force. I don't want the managers. I'll be
especially
the manager.
Especially when you consider that labor force was larger than the alliance they were going into, right? So a lot.
Yeah, I don't really get that.
AOM were larger.
I don't really get that part of it though, because there's a special relationship between Ranger Regiment and AOM, right? We all know there's a special relationship between those two groups. There was, they were friends. Fraternity does the same thing. They make public statements to say we're friends. You did that with Siege Green. You're like, Siege Green and Fraternity are friends. It's very cool. I think it's very cultural too to make these public statements. And then, but Ranger Regiment and AOM had ties that were even, beyond that. We covered that here. It's very public. So when Ranger Regiment is not doing well, according to the Imperium, they were under probation or something. I don't know. I guess they weren't performing well in Pureblind. You would think that if a group is not doing well and their friends are coming over, that group is going to do well after their friends come over. That's how they would, I imagine, want to reconstitute. That's how they would want to improve their standing among peers. So I kind of saw that as like, okay, so a bigger group is going to join you so that you can get the protection of the even bigger group. All that seemed very logical to me. I didn't see that as like suspicious.
I mean, I agree. I think the kind of coming back to the point that I know you don't entirely believe is the sole point. If you've got an alliance that's got 100 corps in it or 30 corps, and then an alliance that brings 100 corps to the table and 100 CEOs that all are going to want their say in the direction of an alliance, you don't know what direction that would push Ranger Regiment in. And obviously Ranger Regiment at that time were, blue to the Imperium, access to all their ACLs, so on and so forth, right? So, I think that is still a credible threat, right? Because it's just because of the sheer quantity.
I don't agree. I don't know why you would think they were a threat. Like that. That's just.
I'm not saying like a threat of war, right? I'm saying a threat of like poor cohesion.
Yeah. Anytime you have an infusion of people, then that's the same kind of issue. I don't see that as anything that groups don't deal with. A large infusion of people coming in to use your facilities. That's what you want. You have a tax base, right? Like they don't own this. They can't take the structures down. They can't damage the structures. They can only use them. So I don't see that as a threat at all. It's a perceived threat. And I think the Imperium's point of view was, well, this is an enemy and we vanquished another enemy. But of the two enemies, I think AOM was fighting Imperium less and fighting Fraternity more. And instead of embracing someone who didn't hurt you very much, you basically are empowering the people that hurt you a lot. Fraternity is the enemy of the Imperium, but I think they want to keep you. I think they want to keep the Imperium. They want to keep Fraternity on the fence. Not fully pappy. So that's what I think the play is, and that's a smart play. That's a good play. That play makes sense to me. Not all this other BS about whatever. It's like that play makes sense, and that I think is what happened. So I think that basically Fraternity. I'm gonna find out, but because I don't know if it's 100%, but I have a feeling that Fraternity weighed in on the AOM thing, and that means that you guys did kill your enemy. You just had somebody else do the dirty work. That would be fascinating.
I mean, I'm just happy they're dead at this point. I mean, they'll come back, right? I mean, they'll come back. Yeah. You can't kill, to the whole kind of.
I think the members.
Go on.
I think the members all joined Dracarys, right?
I think they split. Some went to Dracarys, some went to Bastion, some went to Init, I believe, and I think a couple corps went to Horde. I think there was a couple obviously that came to Frat as well. So they kind of disseminated out, but the whole point with like AOM, especially if you include like the PIBC Serenity element of things, they are a community of gamers that play on Serenity, or a large portion of them are, right?
Yeah.
And you can't kill a community, so never say never, sort of thing.
Dracarys, those guys aren't on Serenity, so they don't have that baggage, but Range Regiment does, and AOM
Range
does.
Regiment does, AOM does. I think some of the former alliances like VVV, MSN do. I must admit, I'm not super lined up with it.
Those guys are allied with NC and PL. They're not allied with. Well, that would be allied with you guys. That's interesting. I have to explore that.
Yeah, I'm not super clued up on the.
Yeah.
This group is linked to this group on Serenity, and this group is linked to this group.
Also, I think that's overplayed, right? We want to think there's like a grudge match going on, but I think a lot of the grudge is more Tranquility based as opposed to Serenity based. I could be wrong, but I don't think that the grudge goes that deep. But who knows?
I think there's probably multiple layers of that. I think there's definitely a Tranquility grudge. I mean, they came to Tranquility, they sided with Tests, they came and evicted us from Dettered, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's definitely a Tranquility based grudge there.
Absolutely. That's where I think
doesn't
the
mean
grudge
there
is.
isn't.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean there are grudges between groups that came to Tranquility from Serenity. There will be some groups that have that, but
Legacy and AOM attacked Winter Coalition for a year, and it went back and forth, and it was pretty. I mean, that's when AOM landed, so it was like a big deal. It's like, now they got. Now Legacy has their Chinese time zone group coming in, and it was like, wow, what's going on here? It was pretty cool, but nobody should forget that before 2020's war. Fraternity and Winter Coalition was at war with Legacy, that is Test basically, and AOM, and that was a big war. All right. Hey man,
that was a long war.
That was a long and brutal war. And I think, this is just me, I've said this before, but I think CCP took you out. CCP put out Blackout. They put out Blackout, and your ADMs, your defensive counters or whatever, disappeared.
Blackout and the Drifter thing happened.
And the Drifter.
Still very bizarre event. I don't understand.
I know the Imperium says that really screwed with them, but they kind of recovered quickly. They had it figured out within a week, I think, within a few days, really. They complained loudly about it, but they figured it out within a week. But you guys, you lost your defensive posture. It was obvious.
And I won't sit here and bash CCP. I'm not sure if it was a takeout, so to speak, or when you've got a war that lasts 8, 9, 10 months, the likelihood of something changing that's going to affect that dynamic. Look at World War II with the industry rebalance, right? I mean, like a year is what, like 5%, 6% of the entire history of the game. That's a long time not to do anything, right?
Yeah. I was being playful by saying CCP took you out.
I know.
I just mean of all the groups that could have complained like, hey, we're victims, it was you guys, right? You're the ones that had a war.
It definitely created its challenges. Yeah, I'll agree. I'll agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, and one more thing about that, because this is kind of funny. Like one of the things that happened, you just reminded me of this. I don't know. This is just a little point at the very end of the show. One of the things that happened was you had CSM members from PL and Imperium come out and say, like, CCP, don't change anything during this war, right? Don't change anything that's going to affect this war. This is a big war. This is what we've been waiting for. Don't you dare touch those mechanics. And then at the very end of the war, CCP creates a tax hike that knocks out one side's income for their SRP, mounting on top of other problems. And nobody said a thing. It's like they didn't really care. I'll leave you with that. All right. Luke, thank you so much for being on, and Sahara and BJK, who we lost to action. He had to go back. Same with Murray. Thank you both for being on. And thank you two here that are still with us for coming on. And thank you, audience, for hanging out with us for Talking in Stations. Remember, this Thursday, look for The Travelers, episode 2. Don't miss that when it comes on. That's it for us today. We will see you next time on Talking in Stations.